Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue Model Virtual Seder. It's such a pleasure to be spending Pesach with you all this evening. And the reason we're doing this is certainly we can't do our communal Seder all together, but at least this way we can connect with our Norris Lee family. And you'll see this evening, we are going to go around the Norris Lee family table with some great cameo appearances, an all-star cast. And you'll see that this is not just for learning purposes, but for some of you, it will be the opportunity to sit just before Pesach on Wednesday evening and follow along with us and invite us to your table. You might be alone or just a couple of you, but to be able to join with us with your Norris Lee family, as I said, before Pesach, but this is our opportunity to celebrate together. Now, I want to tell you, we're doing this in two parts. This evening, we're doing the explanations of the Seder as we go through, and then stay tuned, come back Tuesday evening for happy hour with Chazan Avrami and family, where he will have you dancing. Bring your dancing shoes. It's going to be a lot of fun and singing and all of the second part of the Seder where we just have a lot of fun and festivities. So without further ado.
Well, I just also want to add, because a lot of us, this is the first time we're actually holding a Seder. And so this will be an opportunity for you to see how it's done. So we're going to go through step-by-step process, the minimum requirements, and so on and so forth, or any questions that one might have. So hopefully this will be a educational as well as an exciting experience together with the community.
Wonderful. So we begin. Now, I see we've got a bit of a mistake here on this table because all of these Haggadahs are the same. Now, it's a minhag in most families that everybody uses a different Haggadah. That way, you can always argue over, do we lift the matzahs now? Do we pour the wine now? My Haggadah says this, your Haggadah says that. So just be aware that that is a prevalent custom. But for those of you who are using the Art Scroll Haggadah, we will use the page numbers. We start on page 10. Now, the Seder is called the Seder because it has a certain order. And we actually announce almost the chronology, the table of contents as we begin. So we'll sing it together. Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz Magid Rachza Motzi Matzah Maro Karesh Shulchan Aretz Safun Barech Halel Nitzah.
May God bring order to our lives this Pesach.
Amen. All right, so now we have Kadesh. We're going to make Kiddush. Now, it's customary, we're all like kings and queens on this night of Pesach. And so what we do is for the pouring of the Kiddush, and each person should have their own Kiddush cup, we have somebody else pour for us so that we are like royalty. So I'm going to now pour for the Rabbanit.
He always pours for me, by the way. I'm always his queen. What's the minimum? Is that...
Ideally, you really need to fill up your cup. Now, if you can't drink the whole cup, at least you should have the majority of the cup. Now, I will say that this is a bit of a large glass. You really only need to have an 86 ml cup.
So let's switch.
So,
okay,
we're switching. Okay, we're switching. Okay. All right. So am I pouring? Okay, I'm pouring
so
for
I'm
you.
going to pour for you now. Okay. So we'll. Okay. We'll get the right one. So 1.86 mils is what we need.
No, 86 mils.
Oh, 86 mils.
86 mils.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, I think we're going to need a little more there. So do we have another
bottle? Yes, we do. We came prepared. Okay, and there's always a drop of wine on the tablecloth, but that's okay. It's not Yom Tov without that.
Okay, so we stand up for Kiddush. And I'm going to make the bracha over the wine because we are drinking wine, but I won't say Hashem's name over the second bracha, the bracha for the Kiddush itself. Now, I drank a little because really otherwise it would be an interruption in this model Seder. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher b'chavanu mikol ha'am v'ramanu mikol Hashem v'kiddushanu mitzvosav v'titen lanu elahim b'ahava. Moedim l'simcha, chagim v'zmanim l'sasla, Yisrael chag matzos hazeh, zman cheresin mikol kodesh, zechel yitzias Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'chatu v'tzad mikdash mikol amim, moedei kashecha, v'zimcha v'sasen hinchaltanu, v'chadem mekadesh Yisrael b'zmanim. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu shechianu v'kimanu v'gianu l'zman hazeh. Now we drink, and when we drink now, we're going to lean to the left as we drink. Because remember, back in the day, they would recline. Royalty would recline. The aristocracy would recline as they were eating and drinking.
Do women recline, Rabbi?
In some families they do, in some families they don't. Certainly at HGSS, we encourage women to participate as much as possible. So please, yes, do recline
as well.
And ideally, one should drink the entire cup, but even if one has had just the majority, that works as well. Now, wine is the most ideal drink. If you can't handle wine, then a mixture with grape juice. If you can't handle that, then even grape juice will be fine. Okay. The next piece we do is orchat. For orchat, we wash our hands, but we do not make a bracha. So the same way that we would wash our hands for hamotzi, but normally we would make al netilat yadayim. This time we go and wash our hands, but with no bracha. The reason we wash our hands at the Pesach Seder is that, strictly speaking, we should be washing our hands for all produce of the field, because it's in remembrance of the kohanim, the priests, who would have to wash their hands before eating the truma, the tithes. After the tithes stopped, our sages instituted that everyone should wash their hands prior to eating the main staple of food, so that the washing of the kohanim would not be forgotten. Now, throughout the year, it's just the bread, the main staple, but on Pesach, we want to be extra pious, and we want the children to ask. So we go and wash, and we then have our vegetable, our carapace. So we're going to walk away for a moment. We have now come back and washed. And we're going to take...
How do you wash?
So we wash twice on the right and twice on the left. Some people do 3 times, some people do once, but the general practice is twice on the right and twice on the left.
So it's like the bread. It's like for bread.
It's like for bread, just without the bracha.
No al netilat yadayim.
No al netilat yadayim. Right. In some families, it's only the head of the household. In other families, everyone gets up to wash at this point. But remember, this is all about getting our curiosity going at this point.
Some families you actually bring washing.
That's true.
To us.
Right, because we're like royalty. Yeah. Royalty, exactly.
The basin and the thing.
So we are now up to the carapace, but just before we do the carapace, I'm going to hand you over. Sitting at our Pesach table is Boris Ben Ari. Boris, will you tell us a little about the carapace?
Yes, Rabbi, but you needed to do urchatz first.
We did.
Oh, we did orchatz, but
beg your pardon. Sorry. Right. So I haven't prepared a whole Seder plate because we're not quite ready yet.
That's why we're here with you.
Right. So I have my little bowl of salt water, and I have a little bit of parsley. Now, karpas is the bracha borei pri ha'adama. And I have seen people use potatoes and chives and any other vegetable that you can dip in. So this is one of the dippings that we're talking about in Manishtana. Manishtana is asking, why are we dipping twice? Usually we don't even dip once, but this is one of those dippings that we do this evening. And the reason is given many ways. One is that we were slaves in Egypt and we worked the land and we had tears. And because we worked the land, we say some borei pri ha'adama, which is blessed Hashem, who produces things from the land. And we dip it in salt water and remember our tears. But really, the best explanation that I like to tell at the Seder is that Avram Avinu, our forefather Abraham, was promised many, many children. But at that covenant, he was also promised that those children, his descendants, would become slaves and strangers in a strange land. And the dipping is to remind us how that actually started. How did we end up in Egypt? And we know that Joseph was sold as a slave to Egypt. And what did his brothers do with his coat? They dipped it in blood to show his father that that is what happened, that he would draw the conclusion that maybe he was killed by a wild animal or something. They couldn't tell their father they had actually sold him. And that is how the tragic story of our people ending up in Egypt started. The word karpas is also an allusion to his coat of many colors, because in Megillat Esther we see that the word karpas is used precisely for that. It's some sort of a garment made of wool, and karpas is also usually played on words as kutonet pasim, a multicolored or striped garment. So what we do is we take the parsley in my case, and we say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'adama. We dip it in salt water and we eat it. Chag kasher v'sameach.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Yasher Koach Boris. Chag Sameach to you. So we are now going to do the yachatz. And for the yachatz, we break the middle matzah. And the reason we break the matzah is that we recite the Haggadah over poor man's bread.
Before you break that, they have to be whole, right? Is that a whole matzah?
This is a whole matzah. Yeah, this is a whole matzah. It has a little crack in the middle here, but this is not a crack. This was how it was baked. So let's take it. We'll break that matzah. And of course, 2 halves make a whole. So we take the bigger half, whatever that means for the mathematicians, and we are going to use this for the afikomen. We're going to hear about the afikomen a little later in the Seder. And the other piece we replace, we're going to use it for our bracha later. We put this aside for the afikomen and hope that we can hide it before the children hide it from us. And now we continue with the Magid, the beginning of the story of, which is the main mitzvah of Pesach, to tell the story of the Exodus. So it begins with halach ma'anya. This is our bread of affliction. So we'll sing it very briefly, and then Rabbi, if you want to share an idea from Lord Sachs about halach ma'anya. But let's sing it together first. Halach ma'anya di achalu af hasana be'ara de Mitzrayim kol dichrin yesei be'echol kol ditzrich yesei be'yisach hashatacha l'shana haba be'ara de Yisrael Hashata de l'shana haba b'nei chorin.
Okay.
What was that about, Rabbanit?
That was my custom. Although my father's Ashkenaz, he took up my mom's Sephardi custom to raise the full Seder plate with the matzah and put it over our heads, because just like God lifted us up from slavery, we are lifting ourselves up out of this darkness as well.
Now you wanted to share with us what Lord Sachs says.
Yes. Okay. So it says here, to open our doors and let the people come in and eat. So when I read this, I was like, well, how are we going to do this year? And here we have we have this bread of affliction. At the same time, it's this bread of freedom. And how could it be both? So we just recently did the yachats, where we split it in half. So we have the first part is the bread of oppression, that we ate the bread of slavery. And then when we eat the afikomen, it will turn into the bread of freedom. And so how does that happen? How does the bread of oppression become the bread of freedom? So Rabbi Sachs brings in a beautiful point where he says that the only true freedom that we have is when we share things with each other. And he quotes in his Haggadah from Primo Levi, his experience in Auschwitz. He says the only true freedom they really had was when they were able to disobey the law that was given to them to not share their bread. And once the prisoners were there on their own and said, you know what, we are going to share our bread to the workers out there, that was their true freedom, when they had the opportunity to share with their fellow brethren. And that's what we are celebrating tonight. We're sharing, and we are ready in this amazing community. We have done so much. We are already preparing ourselves for Pesach. And the question of how are we opening our doors and sharing all this special bread, is that we're already doing so. We're already helping others, sharing others with shopping and food and so on and so forth. So Yasher Koach to already celebrating, being ready for the preparation of celebrating the holiday of freedom of Pesach.
Okay, we now invite the Maccabees to our Pesach Seder to give us a Manishtana. Guys, Maccabees.
Maccabees and Edward.
The Maccabees are there.
Edward. Okay. And while we're waiting, we know that it's, you're probably wondering where all our children are. So we wanted to really, show that people are really celebrating on their own, and that, thank God we have a family here with us, and we will have 2 nights with them. We don't want to have them do a third one, but we really want to have that experience, have a alone Pesach. Same experience.
I guess the Maccabees have not joined us.
Are they on?
All right, so we will have to, maybe the Maccabees will be back momentarily. And so, meanwhile, we'll do the Manishtana. It's been many years since I have done the Manishtana, but here goes.
Okay, we'll come back. Okay.
Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylas, mikol halaylas, shebachol halaylas, anu achlin chametz umatzah, chametz umatzah. Halayla ze kula hamatzah. Halayla ze kula hamatzah.
And I think we're on now. Oh, okay. And
all right, so maybe the Maccabees will come join us a little later. They're probably like Eliyahu Hanavi, joining many Seders this evening and making the round. So meanwhile, we move to Avadim Hayinu. Because we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and this is the answer we tell our children. That's why this evening is a night that is always remembered, because if God would not have redeemed us from Egypt, we would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Because any time that our people are found in any country, that country somehow becomes very strong. And it's when God removes that strength of the Jewish people, then Egypt we don't think is a world superpower today, but it's only because God is in control of how the world works. Now we are going to now move along to our 4 children, and we are on page 19. And we're going to, as we move around our Pesach table.
We're having some technical difficulties to call in our community members, but we will get to them shortly. You want to reboot?
Do we have nobody ready to do it?
Everybody? Wanna try?
Okay, while we're waiting, I will sing the Avadim Hayinu. While we're waiting for we have some technical difficulties right now, as we have people waiting in the studio ready to join us. Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Lefaro b'Mitzrayim, b'Mitzrayim. Avadim Hayinu, Lefaro b'Mitzrayim, b'Mitzrayim. Avadim hayinu lefara b'Mitzrayim b'Mitzrayim.
So this is what there are going to be technical issues if some people are zooming in for their Seder. Just for a little bit of what they might experience.
Are they zooming in? Okay.
No, for those who might be.
All right. So we have nobody ready to go with our 4 children.
It's okay. It's okay. Go for it. Go for it. Okay. If we cut off, we'll be right back. So we're just going to try something. Just hang on.
Don't go anywhere. Don't disappear. If we need to reboot the system, we will be right there, just pausing for a commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Same time, same channel. We are still here. But meanwhile, we are looking forward to hearing from Aviva Kaufman and Johnny Shine all about the 4 children momentarily.
Okay.
Okay. While we are waiting for that, let's talk about on page 20, Yochel Merish Chodesh. I might think that we should begin the Pesach story.
Okay, we have.
We are ready. We've got. Ready.
Is Robert here? Who do you have?
Who are we? I know we're waiting to hear from.
Is Robert? Yeah, but is Robert, because he was here? Is Robert ready? No. Okay, so go. Aviva and Johnny. Okay.
Okay, let's hear.
Oh, hello.
And there is Aviva. Aviva, Chag Sameach.
Hi. I've been waving to say I'm here, but obviously it hasn't gone through. Yes. So I was actually just thinking that there are probably a lot of people who will be saying Manish Tana themselves for the first time in many, many years. But I'm talking about the 4 sons, the 4 children. My late father had his Haggadah every Seder, and he had in that Haggadah small pieces of paper on every page that he wanted to comment on. And about the 4 children, he'd say that it was actually talking about one person, about each of us at different stages of our lives. You had the young child who seems to know everything, the Chacham. And then he or she becomes a teenager and they start to rebel a bit towards the Rasha. And then they settle down. They want a simple life, the Tam. They agree with their partner, yes dear, no dear. And then they become an older person and they may be less able to ask questions and they don't quite want to argue. And that's the Sheino Yodea Lishol. And my father always said that with his trademark twinkle in his eye. But actually, he meant it seriously, that we can be any of those at any time of our lives. And it's up to us what we choose to become. Chag Sameach.
Are we back? Chag Sameach. Thank you so much, Aviva. Yashin Koach. That was wonderful.
And we know. Yeah.
Sorry?
No, we wish you long life, and that we know how difficult it is when you don't have your loved one with you.
Do we have Johnny Shine, who's also going to share some ideas about the children with us? Okay.
He's not connected. Okay.
So let's move along to our. We might have to come back to Johnny.
Well, I wanted to make a point where I noticed that Boris and yourself were wearing white. It's very interesting. Why you wear white on the Seder?
Oh, Seder night is like it's almost like a mini Yom Kippur. It's a time that we remember. We know that the Seder is a time of great introspection, because we know that our lives are in God's hands. God can change, transform our lives in the blink of an eye. Here we were slaves thinking that this is life, and then God changed everything. And we hope and pray that this will be the moment that God changes everything. We're currently in a state of darkness, but we know that God can change everything in a moment, and that's our prayer. So we continue on the bottom of page 20 with Baruch Shemer Haftachaso. Clive Friedman.
Great.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, we contract lawyers are a strange breed. The parts of the Haggadah which everyone else skips become the highlight for us. Between the four sons and the Shweki tune to V'hisha Omda is a peculiar statement. Baruch Shomer Haftachato L'Yisrael. Blessed is he who keeps his promise to Israel. The Haggadah recounts that God said to Abram, as Boris has just said, that his descendants would be enslaved in a strange land for 400 years, and that they would then go out birchush gadol, with great wealth. So we praise God for keeping his promise to Israel, because that is what happened. But this leads to a question. For what should we be grateful? That he got us into slavery in the first place? Well, that's a question for another time. But what sort of praise is it to say that God is so great that he keeps his promise? Surely keeping a promise is a pretty basic standard of morality, which we expect from our fellow human beings. When it comes to the eternal one, how much more so would one expect the fulfillment of an obligation? So the rabbis then have to go into contortions to get out of this, that the original promise was 400 years, and yet the time in Egypt was shortened to 210 years, and the time in actual slavery was 86 years. This was not simply redemption, but speedy redemption, only at 86 years in actual slavery. But perhaps more important than this, and more convincing, is the meaning of rechush gadol, of great wealth. Rashi understands this as referring to the gold and silver which were taken from the Egyptians. Incidentally, there is another element of this in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which is attractive to us litigation lawyers. It is related that when Alexander the Great conquered the Orient, the Egyptians lodged a claim for the value of the gold and silver which they had lent to the Israelites, and they demanded repayment. The Jews then admitted the claim, but they filed a counterclaim for the wages of 600,000 Israelites working for the long years of slavery. The counterclaim had the desired effect, and the claim was withdrawn. But it is the meaning of rechush gadol which might explain the answers to the questions about praising God for keeping his promise. In a lecture given in Boston in 1969, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik understood the rechush gadol as not being physical wealth of gold and silver, but as referring to the spiritual wealth of becoming a people, an am, what the Rav called amimut, peoplehood. It is a novel concept. It sheds a light on one of the four expressions of redemption, of V'lakachti etchem li la'am, and I will take you to me for a people. Therefore we declare in the Haggadah, Baruch hamakom baruch hu, Baruch shenatan Torah la'amo Yisrael. Blessed be God who gave the Torah to his people Israel. We mark the glue of a nation created in order to receive and keep his eternal Torah. Read this way, it is easier to understand the praise retrospectively. We might have expected material wealth, but this was spiritual wealth of being connected through the Torah between individual and individual, and between individual and the Jewish people. This went far beyond anything that might have been expected, and it has been this connection and conviction that has sustained us even at the most difficult times and darkest of hours. May it continue to do so, both for our sake and for the sake of all humankind.
Yashikoa, thank you so much, Clive, for those insightful words. Thank you for sharing. Never thought we would have the honor to share a Pesach Seder with you, so thank you. I understand this is your first time in decades that you are here in the UK for Pesach. It's not easy. It's not easy. We're all going through, a lot of hardship this year. We now turn to Lord Robert Winston to share some thoughts on really common. We were meant to hear a little earlier about some technical difficulties, but wonderful to have you here, Robert. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach, Rabbi. I must say, the whole issue of the Afikomen is somewhat puzzling, really. And the question really is, how was the word defined? Probably from the Greek, epikomos. Epi, of course, means about or above or around. I use the word epi for epigenetics, which means around the issue of genetics, which is quite a familiar thing to biologists. Komos is rather more difficult. It might mean revelry, festivals, merrymaking, comedy, debauchery, perhaps. Maybe the word komos means comedy, and anyhow, that is sometimes how it's referred to. And the alternative, of course, is it might be Aramaic, and some people say it's afiku min. However, whatever it is, the point about the Afikomen is the Mishnah makes it quite clear in Pesachim that nothing is to be eaten after the Pesach, after the Paschal lamb. And of course, later on, this becomes symbolized by the matzah. And apparently, of course, so I've just read, I didn't know this before, that the Greek custom was to go onto other people's houses and to have fun, which we can't really do during self-isolation, can we? So maybe that's just as well. And Rabbi Judah the Prince is telling us effectively what we have to do is to eat the Afikomen and then go to bed. So there's a message for all of us. And the question really is, too, what really constitutes something which you might eat afterwards? And there are various issues which are raised, one in Berochos, in 47a, where Rab and Shemuel of Nachadia were eating together and having a meal, and Shimi arrives late, and by that time they've finished, and Shemuel says, well, it's just like mutton and pigeons, which of course is so trivial, you can eat at any time, irrespective of what time the meal is. So that is one suggestion. Yochanan ben Napahar says that the Afikomen might be just nuts and dried fruit, which is just a common dessert. And some people regard Afikomen just as celebration and singing. One of the questions is, why do we hide the Afikomen? Well, there are several suggestions in tradition. One is that it's not to get mixed up with the other matzah, because we're going to eat it at the end. And of course, we wrap the Afikomen in a cloth of some kind to hide it. But of course, that also perhaps symbolizes the Israelites leaving Mitzrayim in a hurry, when they would wrap the thing and put it over their shoulder. And indeed, some of the Sephardim still hold this this custom, and they actually wrap the Afikomen, and certainly in some parts of the world, they even have a special kind of custom where they ask a child to take this out, and they ask the child where he's going, and he says Yerushalayim, and what's he going to do? He's going to be next year in Jerusalem. Anyway, I suppose perhaps the most interesting aspect is the question of stealing the Afikomen. And it looks as if this is probably a misreading of something which comes from the Rambam. apparently he misread the passage in Pesachim where Eliezer ben Hakana says they hasten the matzah in order to keep the children awake. And Maimonides wrote, they snatch the matzah from the children because he didn't quite get the same meaning, to keep the children awake, and so consequently do that. But interestingly, Rav Yair Bacharach from the 17th century, he was a very distinguished man who died in 1702, and he had a pretty terrible life, really. He went from Prague to Koblenz to finally ended up the last 3 years of his, when he was really pretty almost dead, he ended up in Worms. And he regarded that hiding the matzah was really not a great idea, and he really rather disagreed with the whole thing. He was a logician and a scientist, and therefore he rather appeals to me. But perhaps, may I just conclude with this, that the idea of hiding the matzah is rather interesting and quite pertinent today at the very moment, because we're talking about redemption, and really by hiding the matzah, the best to come, the future, is hidden. And so we're all sitting at the moment at a time of great uncertainty. And what we have to do is to hope and to expect that actually the hidden future will be for good. And that is something that I think we all pray for this Pesach.
Yashikova, thank you so much, Robert. Wishing you and Lyra and the entire family Chag Kasher V'Sameach V'Bari. We're now going to go to the, and we're joined by Yaakov Shweki, as Clive told us earlier. Shweki is in Seder nowadays, so Yaakov Shweki, take it away. We're unmuted. We're unmuted. No? Mm-hmm. No? Mm-hmm. Huh? What? Unmute him. Unmute us. Unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Yankel. All right, we are now going to Keith Barnett, who is going to share with us some thoughts about the.
Realize I don't think we filled out the second.
Oh, is that what your Haggadah says? Okay, let's do that one.
I
Okay,
think you're
let's,
supposed to do that before the Manishtana. So
okay.
just so
I think that
we
might be a
don't
little
forget.
round too. Right?
It's empty that one. Okay. So we're just gonna fill it up and before we get to Keith. I know Keith has been waiting for a while. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties.
This
And,
was a full glass when I started waiting.
Alrighty.
Okay, Keith.
So first of all, good evening, everybody. And I'd just like to take this moment to say a huge yeshakar to Rabbi Freeman and to everybody at the shul, actually, for the amazing range of things that you managed to put on virtually for the whole community, whether it's davening, whether it's amazing comfort for our Beilim, whether it's Shiurim, Whether it's Chazan Avromi Erev Shabbos, and this event tonight as well as your own lectures and stuff during the week. It's been an incredible output, and I'm very, very proud to be a member of the community, which is so well served by its religious leadership. Fantastic. Fantastic. Kol hakavod to you all, and Hag Kasher v'Sameach. Vahisha Amda, I loved Vahisha Amda even before Shweki came along. And the idea for me of raising a glass and not being able to drink from it is quite a act of Mesiras Nefesh. But I think that I always used to love this one with the kids, going around the table and saying, okay, everybody around the table, come up with somebody who's tried to destroy the Jewish people. And I suppose the sad thing was it didn't matter how many guests we had for Seder, we could always come up with a different one, and there were enough people to go around for every member around the table. And actually, when we think about this paragraph and we raise our glass, it reminds us that actually as a people, in some ways, we have no right to still be here. The things that we have survived over millennia, whether in the last century in the dreadful events of the Second World War, or even at the time of the Crusades, or even at the time of the pogroms, let alone what happened to Pharaoh in Egypt and what happened with Haman and what happened with Amalek and all the biblical times. Just, there's never been a time where every Jew can live in peace. And I suppose bringing it back to the difficult times that we're facing this year, I know a lot of people will be sitting around their tables thinking, will I have another Seder with my parents? Have I missed my last chance? My children who are not in my home at the moment or abroad, I was so looking forward to spending Seder with them. My grandchildren, who I can't spend time with this Seder, will I have another chance to spend a Seder with them? And we have to take much strength for the fact that it's come true in every generation when it says, "Ela shebachol dor vador, omdim aleinu lechalotenu." They stood against us, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Himself, matzilenu miadam. L'chaim hakasher v'sameach, and we will all be delivered. Amen.
Keith, wishing you and Sam time family a Chag Kasher V'Sameach. We are now.
We're gonna try again. We're gonna try another video. We understand that you couldn't hear the first half of it, so our apologies. And we want to thank Edward, who's been amazing. Edward Howard, our community director of the show. Keith, I don't know if we're the face of the show, but we have Edward, who's really working behind the scenes, and hopefully he'll show us at the end of all this. He'll give us a big wave. So we're going to try the video now. This is a new level of production that we're trying, and I think we figured out the sound now. So we're going to try to go ahead with Dayenu and the Maccabees. So.
Did you share screen?
I didn't share the screen. Hang on. Just a moment. Okay. Go home. Oh, you're gonna cry? No, we need the sound. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, who are we going to now?
So, who do we have in the studio? Okay. Oh, we are double. Ooh. Okay, if you just can't get enough of us, now you see us twice. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. This is awesome technology that we are having fun with. We got to, this is a new way of life, and we hope you're enjoying the show as well.
Is there anybody in the studio?
Not at the moment, so we can move on.
Okay.
We're waiting for a couple more
Hello? Can you hear me? Is that a yes? I can't hear you guys, but if you can hear me, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Everyone can see and hear you. Can I get a Rabbi or Rabbanit? Can I get a thumbs up from you if you can hear me? Yeah, thumbs up. So you want me to go? Because I can't hear you. Okay. I'm assuming I'm now being heard. So I'm just going to start. Let me just check with Edward that I'm being heard. Edward, can you message me if I'm being heard? Yes, I'm being heard. Okay, here we go. All right. Thank you very much to Rabbi and Rabbinit Friedman. It's greatly appreciated that you guys have done this at such short notice, and it's a really beautiful thing that you've done. I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about the name of Passover itself. If you think about it, it's... Oh, sorry. We can hear you, but we can't hear the rabbi. We can hear you, but we can't hear the rabbi. I understand. If you think about it, the name of Pesach is quite a bizarre one, actually. When we think about the different themes of the different Shalosh Regalim, the main foot festivals, but all the festivals really, the names seem sort of quite relevant to the essence of the festival. And we think about the different themes of the different festivals, the names seem somewhat relevant. But when it comes to Pesach, the name Passover, it's slightly peculiar. What would you if I told you about the festival of Passover, what would you say as the theme of Passover? Maybe it's about freedom, national independence, liberation, redemption. But imagine you're on a committee and you guys are talking about, well, what do you think is the what should we call this festival? And someone said, forget Freedom Day, forget National Independence Day, all that kind of stuff. Why don't we call it Passover? And they'd say, well, why call it Passover? And they'd say, well, think about it. God passed over the houses of the Jews on the night of the plague of the firstborn. You'd say, well, I mean, that's somewhat interesting. That's a significant part of the story, but is that the essence of what this festival is about? It seems very peculiar. How can we make sense of that? What is this whole deal with firstborns anyway? Why are we so interested? Why was it so significant that the firstborn of Egypt were going to be wiped out? What's interesting about the concept of a firstborn, in certainly from a Torah perspective, is that it's not always the case that the firstborn from the Torah's perspective is the one who was born first. Jacob is considered the firstborn, but Esau was born before him. Joseph is considered in some respects to be the firstborn, but he wasn't born first among all his brothers. So what's really going on? What's this all about? Why is a firstborn not necessarily why does the title of firstborn go to someone who isn't necessarily born first? And the answer is that the firstborn from a Torah perspective is about, it's given to someone and it's earned. The title of firstborn is earned. Naturally, it would go to the person that's born first, but if that person isn't up to the task, then they won't get the title and someone else will. What is the task of being a firstborn? The task of a firstborn is to dedicate yourself to transmitting the values of the prior generation, your parents' generation, to the next generation. Transmitting those values, being the one that's going to bring that, taking the mantle of the task of bringing it to the next generation. And in a sense, perhaps part of what was going on when you had the plague of the firstborn, of the Egyptian firstborn being wiped out, is God was basically sending a message that the Egyptians' whole culture, their morality, their values, he wanted to put a stop to them being transferred to the next generation, because they were so corrupt, they were so vile, inhumane, and that's certainly part of it. But if you look at the language that God describes the Jewish people, just before the plague of the firstborn. He says, I'm going to make them my firstborn. They are my firstborn. And what happened on the night of Pesach, when the Jewish people chose to be brave enough to take the blood of a lamb, which was a god for the Egyptians, and to break away from their Egyptian culture, to take a stand against their Egyptian culture, and to choose to identify as God's firstborn, meant that they were on that night choosing that as they were about to leave Egypt, they were going to dedicate themselves to being God's firstborn, which meant they were dedicating themselves, the Jewish people were dedicating themselves as a people that were going to transfer or propagate the values of their Father in heaven to all of God's children here on earth. And when you think about it from that perspective, suddenly it seems incredibly appropriate to call it Pesach, because this is about our formation as a people. This is about who we are. This is what we're all about. In Judaism, you can choose to be a firstborn. Doesn't just happen automatically. It happens if you say, I am going to dedicate myself to a mission of teaching, propagating, living by certain values. And a great mistake people make is in thinking that being chosen or choosing, or being part of the Jewish people means some kind of self-aggrandizement. And it's really actually the opposite. It's nothing to do with us. It's actually to do with caring about the welfare of all of God's children, all of humanity, and our own brothers, of course, and brothers and sisters, and also caring about the welfare of propagating God's name. It's not about us, it's about God. And so I think it's a beautiful name for this holiday because it taps into what we're all about. And I guess one point to leave us on is just to think about in relation to what's going on at the moment in the world. We have a duty as a people, as God's firstborn, to make sure that we set an example of how to act, how to interact in these challenging and difficult moments. It's our calling. It's what we're about. We have to be the role models when it comes to teaching and exemplifying kindness, family values, being responsible, behaving responsibly, practicing calmness, practicing faithfulness. And when you think about it from that perspective, Pesach becomes not just a story of liberation, but also a story about a people that are charged with a mission, and a mission which we still have to take the mantle of and continue with until, please God, we bring the world to its perfection. So thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi and Rabbinate Friedman. Thank you to everyone. It's greatly appreciated to be part of, it's an honor to be part of this fantastic initiative. Thank you very much.
I can't hear you. Do you want me to start? Can you hear me? Put your hand. Thank you very much, Rabbi Robertson Friedman. Rabbi Friedman. I want to Seder for us is all about song in our family. We sing lots of songs, and I want to just share 3 different songs that we sing. Unfortunately, our song is much diminished this year. We'll be a smaller group at Seder than we would like to be. The first song I want to share with you, these are all songs that we sing after the meal, is from, it's from After Hallel. And it's a tune that I learnt from when we were having Seder with the family Roth, Sue and Benedict Roth, who are a very musical family, and we love singing this song with them. And it's Hodu Lashem Kitov, Ki Leolam Chasto. Hodu Ladonai Kitov, Ki Leolam Chasto. Hodu Lelohei HaElohim, Ki Leolam Chasto. Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam. Ki Leolam Chasto. I'll do one more verse just so you get it. Hodula Adonai Ha'adonim, Ki Leolam Chasto. Lo senif laot gdolot levado, Ki Leolam Chasto. Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam, Ki Leolam Chasto. Straight after that, we go into Nishmat, and Nishmat has a beautiful part in it, which is Ilu Finu Malay Shira Kayam Ulshoneni Rina Kamon Galav. If our mouths were filled with song like the sea, and our tongues with jubilation like its many waves, if our lips were filled with praise as broad as the sky, and our eyes could shine like the sun and moon, if our hands were spread out like the eagles of the sky, and our feet could run lightly as deer, it would still not be enough to thank you, O Lord our God. O Lord our God. And this is a song that we sing in a round. And I'm actually going to send a YouTube link to it later because I can't really do a round justice right now. But it goes in the parts like this. Ilu, 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 ilu. Someone carries on doing that, and the next people go Ilu, ilu, finu, nu, nu, male, shira, kayam. And the next people go Ilu, ilu. I chose the wrong key. Finu, nu, nu, male, shira, kayam. Ilu, ilu, finu, nu, nu, male, shira, kayam. I just want to play a minute or two of this. That's better than me. Ilu, 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 malele, shira, kayam. Ilu, 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 male, shira. Ilu, ilu, finu, nu, nu, malele, shira, kayam. Ilu, ilu, finu, nu, nu, malele, shira, kayam. I'll send you the YouTube link. With 3 people at home, even 2 people at home, I reckon you can make a good fist of that. And the last one that I want to sing, if I'm not even going to sing it, I'll sing you one verse. We always sing it though, and it's from Reb Bob Marley, Oliver Shalom, Zichron Levracha, and it's the redemption song. And of course, Pesach's our story of redemption, but we're not the only ones who've been redeemed. Many peoples have had their redemption stories as well. I'll sing you just one verse, just because I like singing. Old pirates, yes, they robbed I, sold I to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took I from the bottomless pit. But my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever have, redemption songs. I hope wherever you're making your Seder, you can manage to make it full of music.
He's about to be brought in. Tell him to leave the camera. It's fine.
I'm not quite. Hello, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Do you want me to start? Okay. Thank you very much, Rabbi Friedman and Rabbanit Batya, for asking me to give a little dissertation. You asked me to speak for a couple of minutes, so I won't hang around. I volunteered to speak about Rabban Gamliel, because it says Rabban Gamliel Hayomer. Halfway through the first part of the Seder, we were introduced to Rabban Gamliel, who says, Kol shelo amar shelosha devarim elu. All those who do not say these three words, Pesach on Pesach, lo yatsa yadecha v'ato, have not done their duty. Ve'elu hein Pesach matzah umaro. And the three words are Pesach, matzah, and moro. Now we know what the Pesach is, the Paschal Lamb, which we no longer have. It only existed in temple times, and since the temple was destroyed, we do not sacrifice or eat the Paschal Lamb anymore. The matzah we have, and that is the most important thing on Pesach. And the maror, the bitter herb, reminds us of the bitter times that our forefathers spent in Egypt. Now, why should Rabban Gamliel say these things? That if you don't say Pesach, Matzah, or Maror, you haven't done your duty. Rabban Gamliel was at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple, and later became the head of the Sanhedrin. And after the Second Temple had been destroyed, when it came to Pesach, they didn't know what to do because they couldn't take a lamb to be killed in the temple precincts because the temple precincts were forbidden for them to go there. So they came to ask Rabban Gamliel what they should do. And Rabban Gamliel thought, and he said, well, you have to think about the Pesach, the Matzah, and the Morah, and you have to explain it. Because they didn't think that now that the Paschal Lamb was, perhaps the Matzah was also forbidden to them. So Rabbi Gamliel came back and said, no, we still have to remember the Pesach and remember the Matzah and remember the Morah. So let's hope for better times, and maybe sometime in the future we might have a temple where we'll be able to take our lambs and do the Pesach in the proper way. May you enjoy all your Sedorim, and may you have a wonderful Pesach. Shalom.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Bernard. That was great. You know, my father always says, he always makes sure, you know, if we sort of lose track of the Seder, he always says you have to say Pesach, Matzah, Umarar to make sure that you completed the mitzvah of the Seder. So thank you for those insights.
Naomi as well.
Yes. Chag Sameach, Naomi. Okay. So yeah, so we have, don't forget, we also have the Marar here and the matzah, and we also have the Karban Pesach, the Zroa, and we have the Shafon.
The hour is getting late, and so we're going to fast forward to the end of the Seder now. But again, we encourage you, please do come back Tuesday evening, same place, Facebook Live, where Chazan Avrami and Rachela and the Freilich family will take us through all of the parts of the Seder that we didn't get to this evening, and so much more. But now we move to Martin Kay.
Okay, turn this down.
Martin, you are on.
If callers can switch their radio.
Okay.
Good evening, fellow congregants, and thank you, Rabbi Friedman, for allowing me to share my favorite paragraph in the Pesach Seder. May I also thank you for the way that you are leading our community through these rather dark and difficult times. Now, the paragraph I've chosen comes right at the end of the Seder. It is Netzach. This paragraph was composed by an early 11th century French rabbi by the name of Rabbi Joseph Bonfils, also known as the Tov Olam. It was originally part of a much longer poem or piyut that he composed explaining the laws of Pesach, and it was to be sung by the community on Shabbos HaGadol. So here we are, almost at the end of the Seder service. The meal has been served, the Haggadah has been read, questions asked and answered. The weeks of consternation, preparation, and anticipation are now over. Those guests for whom 4 glasses has proved too much to endure suddenly straighten themselves in anticipation of singing Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem, in full voice, albeit slightly out of tune. One glances knowingly at one's wife, grateful that the brother-in-law or uncle, whose invitation is always a source of contention, has managed to be less of an embarrassment than in previous years. Whereas most, if not all, of the paragraphs in the Seder are repeated, almost by rote on night 2, this one is different. This is because on night 2 in the diaspora, it precedes the call for us to commence counting the Omer. This year is different, as we count towards Shavuos in both hope and anticipation of regrouping as a community once more. Hag Kosher v'Sameach.
Well, Yashikov, Martin, wishing you and Jill and the entire family a Chag Kasher Sameach. Thank you all for joining us this evening. It's been wonderful to celebrate Pesach with you. May we celebrate many, many Pesachs together for years to come. And we, as we say, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, and have a healthy and safe Pesach to everyone. Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim.
Thank you, Edward.
Edward, can we see Edward?
Yeah, we're backstage. There you are. Where are you? Can see you. Thank you.
Fabulous production,
and tomorrow night we're Pesach in the kitchen with Rabbanit Batya on how to make all these special things that we need on the Seder, that from the different recipes for the karpas and how to roast the egg and the shank bone. So at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, back here.